Welcome to Diesel Performance Podcast.
Yo, hear that plural?
I like that.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy.
To it, that Schaumburg slang, boy. Wow.
This is Paul Wilson,
And Chris Emke.
and you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast, in case you couldn't tell. That was our L5P emissions-equipped street-tuned sled pull driver, Joe Hager, kicking us off at the top of the show. Chris, that's your boy.
I do not take credibility for him.
100% Chris Emke's best friend. All right, man. Today we got a really exciting show. This is one I put off a week so that we could get your lazy ass back in the office.
I was dying from pneumonia.
Oh my God, you tell such stories.
I haven't been to the doctor in 11 years.
Listen,
I went to the doctor twice in 1 week.
Before we get into your drama, can I just say we got the 2007 Cummins. We've been sled pulling all year, kicking ass.
Yep.
Despite our driver's inexperience, the truck performed really, really well.
I mean, we had 2 drivers this year.
Yeah,
I'm
one
just
of them.
saying, 50% of the drivers fucking
killed
held
it.
their own.
Right.
I
The
don't
other
wanna mention
50%.
names, but that was me.
The other 50% named Tim Mahoney. He broke it. So
Yeah, well, I mean, he broke it. He snuffed the charger. I mean, he's never sled. I mean, neither of us sled pulled, but he's got a heavier foot than me. He just, you know what?
Yeah.
He don't have to pay to fix it. He don't give a shit.
there's so much honesty in that sentence. Anyways, as a result of the truck being broken,
Yep.
I can say that, we decided, well, let's put it together with some more parts. Now, this is something that honestly other people here in the office were much more passionate about than I was. I thought the truck did exactly what its purpose was at 800 horsepower, drop-in Stealth 67 turbo, all stock appearing. But Chris, even I got to say, I love a twin kit. Come on, man.
I mean, let's just be realistic. A lot of the times when guys call in over to Calibrated Power Duramax Tuner, they have an idea of an end goal. Okay, they like the idea of a drop-in turbocharger. We've grown the turbo department here greatly over the years.
Sure.
With quality parts, R&D, and just making sure that the product meets up to its expectation, right? But you always want more. So what we decided to do, so the truck ended up having a input shaft issue. Okay, so nothing to do with the engine or anything like that. So we went with a fat shaft, had the converter sent out. Did a couple things there, and we decided, hey, why not throw more air and see what the 67 can do in a compound setup?
That's right. The transmission broke, so like every other diesel owner on Earth, we decided, let's also work on the turbos.
Exactly.
So
what do we do? What do we do in that?
Yeah, so doing an S400 kit over it, S400 kit, of course, twin turbo kits. Who do we go to for that?
Well, it's a step further than that.
We go to WC Fab.
So we call Jason. We go, Jason, we have this idea. This is what we want to do. Are you in or out? After a little convincing, he's in, okay? This isn't your conventional stock S475, S480 kit. This is a 67 over an S488. So it's not your conventional piping kit that we would offer a customer or Jason would offer a customer. It's Jason's kit that we sell. It's a little different because the 488 has a different discharge off of the compressor housing, the downpipe. The fitment's a little different. It's a little bit bigger of a package. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like in the engine bay. But the guys in the shop are actually putting the turbo kit on the truck now, and we'll get some tuning underway. So we're not doing anything fuel injector-wise. We're just going to run that, see what we can get out of it, and see how efficient and reliable and clean power, we can make out of, as aggressive as, what turbos do you have? Oh, I have a 67 over an 88 millimeter. Those are some bad fucking turbochargers. And realistically, it's packaged in a way that,
If I would have told somebody it was an S475 over stock, I doubt the average person could spot it.
And that's exactly
right.
it. If I said I had a stocker S400 kit for towing and I popped the hood, I would believe that person.
Sure.
But this is a setup that's going to do 1,000 all day long with the fuel that we have, maxed out. And we'll revisit next year and see what happens. But we're really excited to see how the package comes together.
Absolutely. And hey, for our fuel systems in this truck and all of our trucks over at Duramax Tuner and Calibrated Power, the employees, the customers, the shop, everybody, we use Exergy Performance. That's because we get that same amazing performance and consistent quality every single time. One of the other things I want to talk about before we dive into the big topic of today, Chris, is Black Friday.
Dude, you're getting early with this.
Can you believe it's like a month and a half away?
Yeah, I know, but you usually don't bring up anything Black Friday for like 3 more weeks.
Yeah, I usually probably like it's 6 weeks away, so usually like I wait until about 5 weeks to start talking about it. We haven't made official deals yet. What we're saying is right now, if you're looking for deals, follow along on the Facebook pages for Duramax Tuner and Calibrated Power. We're going to be posting them probably in the next 2 weeks here. So when I'm about 4 weeks away from Black Friday, we're going to announce what those sales are going to be. We in the past have just done some standard discounting, kind of help people out. We know there's a lot of shoppers out there who want to, be a part of the experience. This year, I think we're going to really go for some doorbusters on some of the cool stuff.
I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, I don't even know what we're getting ourselves into, so I'm excited to see how creative you get with that. So, guys, be on the lookout and follow our Facebook and our Instagram pages. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of pages, Chris, we made an announcement last week while we had our guest host in here, Justin Tyson, producer of the show, and we said we need to rename the Facebook group.
Yeah.
So I put up a poll the other night. We've had overwhelming response. If you haven't checked it out, jump on Diesel Performance Podcast Q&A. That's our Facebook group for the show. Willing to answer any questions we can about diesel. If Chris or I don't know, we'll try to tag one of the knowledge leaders in the group so that they can get you some answers. Right now, the poll leading response is Paul Wilson loves the 6-liter.
I think he loves other things, but that's just me.
Kind of a rough one for me to sign off on. But, hey, listen, I made it with half a bottle of Jaeger in. We'll pick the winner with half a bottle of Jaeger out. So we'll see what happens.
So you're an alcoholic?
No, come on, Chris. I was being social.
Oh. So for today.
Let's dive in. We got the history of the 5.9-liter Cummins. Right off the top, people are going to ask why we didn't just do history of the Cummins.
There's too many RPOs and too many differences, and I think the 5.9 is a show worthy all on its own, and we'll go into the 6.7 some other time.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Just one wholeheartedly, as I dove in to start doing the research on this, like I know Cummins, I've been around Cummins for 7 years, 10 years, something like that. Like I'm pretty familiar with them. I've worked on a lot of Cummins trucks. But man, I don't deal with any of the older shit. Yeah. Like if it's pre-common rail, I don't care. Yeah. And even when we got into the VP cultured stuff that we tuned, I really wasn't heavily involved in that market. I didn't do a lot there.
So you're not cultured, you're saying?
Right. That's anytime I see a Big C and wintergreen chewing gum, I always know I found culture.
Yeah. No, that is a side of the diesel industry that you are not, very familiar with.
Yeah. And I'm learning because over the years, I know that that's also a big part of the group of people that I've met that I think are probably some of the most fun to be around.
Man, you know what? I think a lot of times when you talk to guys, the 12-valve Cummins, the 7.3 Power Stroke, these are entry-level platforms that, guys that are seasoned in this industry now, that's where they started.
Yeah.
And I mean, even newer guys, younger kids now that, maybe I wasn't fortunate enough to be in a family where, you go get a newer truck purchased for you. When I turned 18, my first truck was a 12-valve that I bought, for a deal off of Craigslist, and then you could afford to modify slowly over time, and that grew into what I do now. So
right.
It's an affordable way to kind of get into the industry and learn the ins and outs. So
I mean, I've always said I understood the power potential out of some of these older trucks, and if you're gonna do like a real raw budget build, like we've talked to guys like Tyler Kipp, who
you're gonna beat.
Have really pitched it, and it's hard to beat. And I guess I've always understood that. I didn't understand the massive amount of progression that this staple has gone through, because I do think of Cummins as a staple, and the 5.9 liter specifically. This led the industry in so many ways for so long.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, not to dive in too deep here, but if you pick up a Diesel Power magazine back in 2008 to 2012, any of the big hitters, it was mechanical injection. Yeah. And I would say 2011, 2012, 2010, 2012, that's when, the common rail stuff started to kind of, come into its own. Well, common rail injection on some platforms has been out for 8-10 years already.
Sure.
But and even to this day, there are still improvements that are being made in the mechanical injection arena. Some of the top sled pull trucks in the country still run, a mechanical injection setup. Yes, it's dated, okay, but it works.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into that. So we're going to talk all about it. So this is a truck that's run from 160 to 325 horsepower over the years. 18 years the 5.9 liter was in production approximately. I know there's some variation on that. It's been put in Ram pickups, commercial vehicles, tractors, industrial equipment. It's just they've used this everywhere.
They just had a thing, Cummins, not long ago that they produced their millionth motor.
Yeah. I don't doubt it because I actually have that spec somewhere as we get into some of the year breakdowns here. They've seen changes all the way through the truck. I mean, fuel system, turbo, trans, fucking intercooling, electronic control. These are things that generally we see not just a small RPO change, but like total redesigns. And this is something that
they still stayed 5.9 liter.
They've stayed 5.9. They've stayed i6. There's so many things that they've done what they could to keep the same. And that's something that I think is a huge shout out. So Chris, I'll let you kick it off. These things launched in 89. The first year, I think, or first batch ran from 89 to 93. What do you know?
Started off at 160 horsepower. What's really unique about these is, the first gen Dodge, very simple. So in 89 to 91, early 91, they offered a non-intercooled, turbocharger. Then there's this elbow that went across the motor right into the intake plenum. 160 horsepower, 3-speed automatic, or you can get a get-reg 5-speed manual trans. Those are your two options. Was a proud owner of one of those a while back.
Oh yeah.
And you get 55 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour out on the freeway and wind out 2,800 RPM. And then you're doing a governor spring and a fuel pin in the injection pump. So what's really unique is it had a rotary style mechanical injection pump. Very, very simple, very extremely fuel efficient, reliable. They don't make any power.
Right.
Okay? They really don't. What's also unique is even though it was a non-intercooled motor, the trucks would actually baseline at around 180 horsepower, maybe even tad more, tad less. So they were rated for a certain horsepower, but they made more. The injectors in the 89, 90, and early 91, they were actually bigger than the Big Brother, which was the 91.5, 92, 93, where you actually get a little smaller of an injector, a little bit bigger of a turbocharger. You get an intercooler, and then you actually get a 3-speed with overdrive called an A518, which was a non-lockup overdrive style transmission. Very simple, very basic. The engine itself had gasket, head block, injection, connecting rods, things like that. All that stayed the same. Things to look out for, the killer dowel pin, which was very common with all the 12 valves, which we'll get into with the second gen style as well. But it was a simple truck. They are very dated. They're very nostalgic. I think they hold a lot of value, or there's a respect for them in the industry as a whole. You go to a show and you see one of these trucks, they're definitely pretty cool to look at. So.
Yeah, absolutely. These were competitive too at the time. I mean, you got to remember, like we look back now in 2019 and say, oh, it only had 160, maybe it made 180, which is I think the last time a manufacturer rounded that way on their horsepower ratings, right? But at the time, that was a lot. That was competing against a non-turbocharged 6.2.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about, in 89 when these rolled out, you were talking about non-turbocharged or turbocharged 6.2. You're talking about IDI 6.9s and IDI 7.3s. Turbocharged Power Strokes didn't come out until 94. And we're talking, 160 horsepower. I believe it's 360 feet-pound of torque, something along those lines. So, I mean, you get in one of those trucks, you get behind the wheel, the truck doesn't get out of its own way, and it's got enough torque to pull down a fucking house. Simple as that. And with a couple of minor modifications, you could pick up 80, 100 horsepower with a screwdriver, essentially. It'll run a little warm, maybe some other upgrades need to happen there, but I mean, shit. I remember my first one, man. I bought that truck with like 350,000 miles.
Yeah.
And I got rid of it with 450,000 miles. And I had it a couple of years, drove the piss out of it, and that thing never an issue. Maybe leaked a little out of the rear main, typical, Cummins fashion.
Sure.
If the Cummins doesn't leak anything, man, it's not broken in yet. So, but they're in parts are very, very, very inexpensive for them, which I think in the aftermarket you'll learn as a lot of guys get into these trucks, injectors are inexpensive, turbochargers, things like that. You can upgrade them relatively inexpensively.
Yeah.
So really, really cool. Thinking about it now, I kind of miss mine.
Well, we'll hold off before you jump into one of those piles of crap, because in '94 they totally revolutionized diesel performance, and it wasn't just OEM diesel performance. They released technology that we still use today in the top tiers of diesel competition, and I'm talking, of course, about the famed the absolute pinnacle of high pressure pumps, and that's the P7100, the P pump. Dun dun dun.
I remember. So back in the day, going through one of these Diesel World magazines, there was a beautiful first gen that was just redone, right? And I was just getting into this. I remember reading the magazine, and they were like, "Oh, P pump conversion, to get more power." I'm like, "I'm gonna P pump mine. I don't even know what the fuck a P pump was." And,
it's funny you say that, Chris. A P pump was revolutionary for so many reasons. One, I don't want to say it's a mini engine because it doesn't have internal combustion, but outside of that, it's a mini rotating assembly.
It has a cam. It has pistons for the plungers.
That's right. So each plunger fuels one injector at a time. That's completely different than what anybody else had ever done in fuel injection. I mean, when I say this is revolutionary, I mean, it really was revolutionary. It really was something nobody else had done. And it was almost an overcompensation from that rotary VE pump you had referenced in that early one.
Completely night and day.
Where it had one plunger running 6 injectors. This is just the best definition of overkill I've ever seen from an engineering team. And it is. It's what I thought was really, really interesting is that this 52-pound rotary or rotation assembly unit is actually emissions driven.
Yeah, I mean,
did you know this?
There's a vacuum that goes into the system, and there's actually
the whole reason they designed it, the whole reason it was ever invented, wasn't necessarily the problem with more power. Or even increasing horsepower and torque at all.
It's about efficiency.
It was about efficiency. It's about running higher pressure, fuel pressure, to meet emission standards that were coming out in '94. So when we talk about emissions, I just want to remind everybody that this has been something this industry has dealt with since its inception.
Well, I think the thing, too, that a lot of guys don't really think about or even understand, there are actually 12 valves that were produced with EGRs.
Yeah, absolutely
so
correct.
That's a thing.
Absolutely correct. So I thought that was like a really interesting thing to kind of know about that. These models in 94, 98, they did have a lot of the same components as Chris had mentioned earlier, from 94 to 90, or I'm sorry. Okay. Just a lot of the actual mechanical internals were identical. Those things did not change.
Through the 12-valve motor itself.
Exactly. However, they did see new injectors. They went up about 200 PSI. They went from 245 bar to 260 bar.
That's the pop-off of the injection pump itself.
Absolutely correct. Got a revised camshaft, got revised pistons, also due to emission standards. So those still all cast aluminum, revised fuel bowl to increase swirl or atomization. So I think fuel bowl and spray pattern are something we talk about a lot now in common rail injection. I didn't realize this was even something they were addressing in 12 valves when I dove into this. And they also did this thing where they narrowed the ring land on the top of the ring for emission standards.
Didn't know that.
Wastegated turbo. I didn't realize. I thought 12 valves just ran HX35s.
Okay.
Again, call me ignorant.
You're ignorant.
Thanks, Chris. These initially in '94 they came out with the WH1C, the same turbo as the previous models, but a tighter 12 centimeter housing and wastegated. Absolutely. So they went from an 18 centimeter housing to a 12 centimeter housing. That's a huge jump.
Well, I think the thing too, when you talk about the first gen, they ran very loose housings, but they were non-gated.
Right.
And the idea was to
it wouldn't peak out. Exactly. Yeah.
So now technology, right? Go figure technology and emission standards and things like that.
Here it is.
Tightening the housing, putting a wastegate into the system to alleviate back pressure so you don't overspeed the turbocharger.
Turbo technology is not driven by horsepower demand. It's driven by emission standards. So when we get better turbos in the market, it's because of emission standards. I just, again, thought that was like something I didn't know. In 95, they finally swapped over to the whole set HX35. It's a wastegated 12 centimeter housing. I have a bunch more details on it, but nobody will care. So this is an extremely reliable charger. Even at double the factory set PSI, which is 20, so even when you take it up to 40, it's considered one of the most reliable chargers ever put on a diesel truck. So these things kick ass, man. I mean, they got a larger intercooler, a new body style in 94. I also didn't realize this. Now, the first 5 years the Cummins was out, it was number one in torque for the big three. But the ratings changed not only dramatically throughout the few years that this 94 to 98 was produced. It went from 160 all the way up to 215. But they split hairs at this point in our world where it's even between the manual and the automatic. It's like it's rated at 160 for an auto, 175 for a manual. I just want to know, knowing what a 12 valve is and how power and control, it's not like this is an electronic calibration. So does that mean the guy at the factory just does half a less turn on the set screw?
Well, I think, there's a lot to be said about the internal workings of the pump itself. When we were talking about the pumps, we're talking about the cams and things like that. Those all have something to do with it.
Now, I didn't find anything saying that if you have a manual transmission 12 valve in 95, your cam or your P7100 was any different than if you had an auto. I just couldn't find where they set the difference.
The power output is based off of the pump. So when you talk a 94, 95, the pump references, you have the 160 pump, okay? Or you have the 175 pump, the 180 pump, the 215 pump.
Okay.
So there's all of these things that come into play. In the aftermarket, the most desired is like the 180 pump. So like when
Why not the 215?
I believe it has like a variable timing or variable geometry to the cam or to the pump itself.
Okay.
And they get a little finicky at like the higher RPMs or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that, but there is something along those lines.
I think in the future,
happening.
I would like to loop back and do a history of the P7100 and take it from when it first came out all the way up to today of what are the high performance trucks that it's on in 2019. I think that would be a really cool one.
Future episode coming near you.
Done. Okay, so these ran some different options with transmissions as well. NV4500, I believe, across the board was offered.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the 47RH in 94, 95. And then the 47RE, 96 to 98. That's the new four-speed auto. 47RH, hated?
I wouldn't say it's hated. It's more or less like technology. It's a mechanical lockup 47.
Okay.
The RH, where the 48R or 47RE is a electronic lockup. Yeah. Okay. It's just, again, as time progressed, the housings and everything and internals are very similar, all the way from the Torque Flight 727 3-speed in 89 as the A518 four gear, no lockup. Then you get into the 47RH, a mechanical lockup, 47RE, electronic lockup. The housing, the casing, the internals are all very similar. When you buy rebuild kits, they'll have A518 / 47RH.
Gotcha.
47. So there's
a lot of crossover there.
Yep. And the Torque Flight, the original 3-speed, that would be the same trans that you would find in like an old Hemi back in the day.
Right.
So a lot of crossover that Ram's done over the years. So to the guys that are running a 47RE, 48RE, 47RH, A518, you're dealing with an old muscle car trans, man. It really is a car trans.
100% agree. Okay, now this is something else I thought was maybe not unique. I think we know of this, especially from the Duramax background for me, and I know when we were doing the Ford research, we saw this as well, about transition years. So in 97, in preparation for the 24 valve that's coming out in the ISB, they started shifting some of the like basic bolt-on bullshit and also some of the like actual bolts and things like that that went on these trucks. So like you got 12 millimeter bolts to secure the main caps versus the 14 millimeter bolts they previously used. All late model 12 valves were equipped with the same were equipped with smaller diameter fasteners. So like it's just these little things like this that they started doing in preparation, knowing that 2.5 years from now, or because they have to start at the beginning of 97, so they're like 2.5 years from now we're going to switch to something else. Start making the transition now, and we saw that kind of across the board. There was a bunch of little ancillary bullshit that they did to get ready for the 24 valve that was coming out. Killer dowel pin, man, the KDP. Everything I read everywhere that says, like, if you read 12 valve, you better know about the KDP.
Yeah,
it's real.
It's a little steel sleeve, right, that goes into the front cover, that goes into the block. And those, from vibration over time, they'll back out, and then the front of the front cover, right, the front timing arena, if you will, of a motor of a Cummins isn't by a chain, it's by gears.
Right.
And that sleeve would get caught in the gears and it'll catastrophic.
That's what everybody said. And they're like, listen, we get it's a lot of time. We get it's a lot of work. If you plan on doing anything but competition with the truck, get in and do this. Oh, and by the way, if you plan on doing competition, you're going to do this.
Yep.
So, like, it's one of those things, man. But then in 98.5, they come out with a set of unique technology that nobody else in the diesel world ever adopted.
Yeah. So what's really weird about the 98.5 to 02 trucks, and I think back in the day there was a lot of flack for these, they go to a different style injection pump. So they go to what's called a VP44 from Bosch, which, by the way, the VE pump, the P7100, the VP44, they're all Bosch injection pumps.
All, yep.
Okay. So it's a half mechanical, half electronic rotary style pump. So it goes back to that single plunger style, if you were to think about it from a technical standpoint. But it has its own computer or brain box. So it has it has a control system on top of the injection pump that controls the pump in as far as timing goes, injection pressure, things like that.
I would comparatively say maybe like Atari level technology.
Yes.
Right.
So some of the misses there. So the same platform, second gen Dodge. You still have the same 47RE transmission. You go from a 205 horsepower to a 235 horsepower output, depending on if it was standard output or high output. Manual versus automatic. Those same configurations hold. But what they do is they go, so in the 12-valve world, you have a lift pump that can supply around like 40 PSI-ish, I believe, of supply pressure.
Right.
Then they go to this electronic rotary-style pump, and then they put a lift pump on there, and that lift pump was generally burning out, causing the pumps to fail. Well, unlike the P7100 pump that's oil-cooled, the VP44 is liquid-cooled, so it's cooled by the fuel that it produces, okay, that it runs through the system. So what you would find is these pumps would prematurely fail due to the pump itself or the motor or the computer itself getting hot and failing.
Yeah.
So technology there, but I feel like this is the first time where now you're getting into an arena of the Duramax world, okay? 6 liters weren't really a thing. They were still 7.3, so I feel like the Cummins was superior power-wise to a 7.3.
Yeah.
But now the Duramaxes are coming out. Hot rod motherfucking trucks.
Well, you just think about this. So 98.5 to 01,
Yep.
they're still leading.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
in a lot of
2000,
categories.
let's say 2000.
Yeah, 2000, right?
98.5 to 2000.
So they got a
leading.
year and a half where they're leading with this technology. And if you think back across the board, what everybody else is having problems with, Ford 7.3s don't have this problem. Any of the IDI stuff doesn't really have this problem. But the GM 6.5, how to cool off electronics, did you just say PMD? Right. Massive issues. I think with just technology, automotive technology in general, of figuring out, hey, we have these awesome electronics. Look at these awesome things that they're going to do for the cars. Yep. And then all of a sudden going, oh, shit, in the real world, this only kind of works.
So
and then they figured it out.
Yep. And I think, again, it's a segue into the technology advancements that we see today.
Yeah.
But I mean, a 24 valve is every bit mechanical. You still have a mechanical injector itself that has a certain pop off that it would open and close under due to the pressure that the injection pump offers. The injection pump doesn't more or less play very nicely with the ECM. So there would be codes that the injection pump would throw that the ECM wouldn't monitor, that if you put your scan tool up to it, Chrysler diagnostics will show, but Cummins diagnostics won't really show. So, the 98.5 to 02, as much as they are simple to a novice guy, as far as diagnostics are concerned, they could be a little bit more on the, headache side.
Well, let me ask this.
Side.
Just all personal nostalgia aside, from a completely logical standpoint, if I'm looking at getting into diesel trucks for the performance aspect, would I look at a late model 12 valve or an early common rail or a VP?
I mean, again, price is out there, simplicity is out there, and the ability you're doing all the work yourself, okay? Coming from someone who's been fortunate enough to work on all three, the first question I would ask is, what kind of power are you after? If you're looking at making, 500 wheel horsepower, We know that there's going to be a trans involved regardless on any platform.
All of them.
The common rail is going to be the one to beat. However, when you have to replace injectors, they're a little more expensive. Okay?
Sure.
The VP stuff, that's kind of where I would go right off the bat, because the pump to replace, very simple. My navigation skills around that motor is very pure and crisp.
Right.
Okay. But only because of the cost factor of the replacement of the injectors and the pump.
See, I would think if you were just doing straight up, just on the logic of a new person coming to it, I think it'd be hard pressed not to say look for a 12 valve if you're not going to get raped on it.
Well,
I mean, that's the problem with the 12 valve.
Now
is
let's
the
flip side that.
The retail price on buying the truck has gone crazy.
The big problem that I don't like about the 12 valve truck is I hate working around the injection pump. I am not a fan, because just getting into where the bolts and crevices of getting the injection pump out,
okay,
that's been something that I just didn't like. Otherwise, truck is very, very, very simple. Very minimal components are needed to make the power. Okay,
Yeah.
Again, that's just a preference. But we're talking about a truck that this day and age, right now, I could go buy a fucking common rail.
I know, for the
03 to
price of a
05
12
truck
valve.
for the cost. One of the guys at work here just sent me a link. I'm in the process. I'm looking for a winter beater, okay? And he sends me this beautiful 12 valve. Beautiful, beautiful 12 valve. Gray, sport front bumper. It's been redone, nice truck. 15 grand. I just got tagged in a post the other day on an 03 common rail crew long manual for $4,500.
Wasn't your boy Hager just looking at an LLY for 10 grand
Yeah.
that has like a good list of modifications?
I'll tell you what, I have been out of the game of buying and selling vehicles for a little bit. It's been about 2 years for me, and it's just the one thing that still holds true is the second gen Dodges hold their value, but we're seeing all these technology friendly vehicles, right? The common rail injection, if you will.
Yeah.
Those vehicles are starting to come down in price even more so, but I think it's just because of the cost of repairs. I think that plays a big role.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of collector nostalgia around the 12 valve, as opposed to that the people who will be able to afford nostalgia in a vehicle haven't hit that market yet. I think 5-10 years from now, guys will be going out buying up the early common rails because it will have been, that was my first truck.
No, and I mean,
right?
very,
Like that's
very, very much so. I mean, I think again, as we stress and talk about, the 12 valve is the entry level diesel.
Yeah.
Well, to a lot of the listeners here, I mean, you and I sound dated now. Because the common rail is kind of that. So, it's a preference thing, but I would say, looking back at like my father, or you look back on your father, or, we talked to like Nick and, his dad, they're very big in like muscle cars and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That 12 valve or that 7.3, I mean, that kind of holds in the diesel arena of respect. You see one of those trucks that are done up, or even a factory style, restoration.
Sure.
You respect that.
Yeah.
But it's also how old of a vehicle. That's what you grew up around. That kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, no, I would say as far as the 98-02 trucks, towards the end of their rope, 235 horsepower for the high outputs, 0102. They also went from an NV 4500 offering to an NV 5600 offering, so a 6-speed manual. That happened mid 2001.
Not very well received, from my understanding on that.
I mean, I think the big thing is to a hardcore tower, maybe they would respect it a little more. But a lot of the mixed perception there is people thought that they got a different final drive. 1 to 5 in an NV45 and 1 to 6 in an NV56 are the same final drives.
Right. You got a granny gear.
They cut the fourth gear.
Okay.
No, they cut the fourth gear and split it. So it's just more shifting going on. You still have the same granny gear 1 and 1. So,
right.
You have that going on. But I would say, at the end of the second gen VP44, life, they were out horsepowered. Okay. They were out torqued compared to some of the competitors out in the space. They were dated as far as interior is concerned. The transmissions, unfortunately, were subpar at absolute best.
Right.
And that brought us into the new arena of common rail injection.
That's it, man. I will give Cummins this, and this is kind of, I think, the takeaway I took of looking at the history of these engines. They know when to adapt.
Yeah.
They know when they have to make a change.
Well,
Ford held on to terrible ideas for much too long. Far too long.
And
Duramax
they also made bad decisions to keep up with the competition.
Yeah, exactly. And Duramax has put so much time into comfort that sometimes they miss the mark when it comes to performance.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that the Duramax lineup were the staple in hot rod diesels, in my opinion. And for years, I mean, I remember years ago, my dad's buddy had a horse farm, and every couple of years he would buy a new Duramax, and he had an LOI that he just couldn't get rid of, and then an LBZ that was so much better than the LOI. And I remember they had a 3-acre parcel, and I used to maintain their land and cut their grass once a week. And I remember talking to the guy, the gentleman's name was Frank, and you go, hey, Frank, how's the truck running? Oh, man, you stand on that, spin the fucking tires, man, I'll tow my trailer. That's what you thought about. And the same thing with, like, the 6-liters, like a 6-liter Ford. They were kind of like a hot rod.
Yeah.
They offered multi-purpose, feeling as far as power torque output. But 03 comes around, and you got to think about this, guys. In the Cummins lineup or in any of these RPOs, this isn't a motor that they just in 02 were like, hey, we're going to come up with a common rail injection. No, this was something that was practiced for years prior. They did all their research. They were in development for a long time. And they come out with a high injection pressure, 23,000 PSI of injection pressure, common rail, electronic injector, CP3 pump, all the badass technology that, the Duramax had already kind of brought into the mix. So you get a Bosch CP3, Bosch injectors, common rail, high pressure, the whole 9 yards. Turbocharger, you go to an HE 341, so very similar to an HX35, believe it or not. The packaging's a little different, but the wheel sizing, you go to a 58 or a 59 millimeter, something along those lines.
Yeah, 58, 9.
58, 9. And, 9 for the 9 centimeter exhaust housing, a mechanical wastegate setup. You go to a bigger intercooler yet again.
Yep.
Okay, so the cooling is more in depth and more improved.
And it's almost like every iteration Cummins has ever done, they've added air.
Add more air or the ability to flow air.
Right.
Transmission-wise, some of the trucks have a 47, some of them have a 48. A little bit more improved, but honestly, man, I mean, that's just that this is where Dodge, I feel, has always missed its mark, is in the transmission arena. Badass motor.
I literally read in one of the articles, God, and I wish I could remember what it was. It was probably from Mike McLaughlin. It said the 48 auto transmission, not as well liked as the 47 RE. And this is something I feel like every single year they've released a transmission. Mm-hmm. People are like, man, I really like that old one better. Yeah. I thought everybody hated the old one. Like, I noticed it all the way through. Every time I read an article about one of them, they were like, oh, but we hate this new trans. And you're like, but I thought everybody hated the last trans.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to see how, as time progressed, or I don't know what Dodge at the time was thinking when you have GM with this badass Allison trans, and I mean
totally different technology in the trans too.
Exactly.
It's
the
a
way
different
it shifts,
transmission.
the way it operates, and then you have Ford. I mean, to all the Ford owners out there, I mean, come on, man, you had a 4R100 or a 5R110, man. You never had really much to worry about on the trans. I mean, there was a select few that would have problems. Guys, don't give me flack for saying that, but Ford's always had a very dominant trans.
I can beat anything.
Always had a dominant trans.
I can beat anything hard enough to break it, but that doesn't mean it's normal for it to break.
Exactly. A 48 or a 47, you could legit drive the truck off the showroom floor and it would shit the bed.
Yeah.
They were soft.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now we broke up 03 and 05 from 06 and 07. After doing the research, Chris, I don't think we needed to. There was so few changes. I mean, 06, 07, we're still I didn't mean to cut you out there.
Let's cut back, though, because it wasn't just 06, 07. 03, 04, it was 305 horsepower output. Then they go to a high output, no 4.5, through 2007.
Right.
325 horsepower and 600 feet-pound of torque.
They actually just dropped HO from the nomenclature. There's just
06,
nothing. It's all the same
output.
It is. Right.
Correct. But there were some changes, ECM, things like that.
Yeah,
so
right.
What do we got there?
Right. So there's definitely an ECM change. It's all still common rail. 05, they updated the turbo to an HE 351, which is the same size as a 341 internally. It's just electronic wastegate instead of mechanical wastegate. It's all electronic solenoid injectors. They did add a third injection event to reduce emissions.
Right.
143-degree spray angle.
What's also weird, not to jump in,
please.
So when you look at the Duramax, 04.5 is when the production year took place, that every engine that rolled off the showroom floor had an exhaust gas recirculation system, an EGR.
Right.
Okay. Ford, 04, 03, 6-liter came out, 03.5. EGR was introduced.
Right.
Cummins, we're talking 06, 07, they did not have an EGR on the motor.
They did not have an external EGR.
Right, but now that's, again, technology. What happened internally?
Right, so internally they found ways to reuse the inert gas.
From the cam.
Right. So it's when we talk about deletes, when we talk about EGRs, when we talk about this emission standard, that emission standard, there's been good, there's been bad, but we continuously see it driving the industry.
Yep.
Before this, production years would sit for 10 years. 8 years at a time with literally no updates, no changes. There was no reason for them to do it. And now we're seeing that some of these standards do actually push improvements. We're getting turbos that spool up faster, make higher peak horsepower numbers. We're using the air that comes through the turbo more efficiently. We're adding intercooling. We're getting better pistons. We're getting better cams. We're getting better injectors.
Efficiency.
We're learning efficiency. We're getting better fuel mileage for more horsepower. There's been a lot of things that have driven throughout the years, even in the 5.9 liter, that I think most people, if you were to ask, would say 5.9s don't have emissions equipment.
Right. Well, again, to certain degrees, they're not wrong. However, technology, and there were advancements of, again, the cam, some of the 12 valves like we talked about earlier in this podcast had EGRs, right?
Yep.
If it was California emission. But let's talk about 1989 through 2007, essentially carrying the same displaced motor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's the longest run. It's the longest run of anybody for diesel. I think to say impressive probably takes away from it, right? Because it's something that they've done so well for so long, and with the new 6.7s, which we'll be most likely doing next week, you're going to see that they may have changed the displacement, but it's still a fucking Cummins, man. They kept so many things the same.
Well, what's really cool is, everything's interchangeable. Like, look at all the motors, guys, that are out there now. 6.2 liter Cummins, 6.4 liter Cummins, and you have the 6.7, you have the 5.9. These are all interchangeable parts that allow these quote-unquote displacements to take place. So, even though the displacement changed, a lot of the components, didn't.
Yeah.
It's, again, simplistic. The Cummins, I feel, is one of the more popular platforms because of the simplicity of the power plant itself. And it holds true with, this episode and in the future episode with the 6.7, I feel.
Absolutely. Before we take off for today, I wanted to cite some of our sources, just give credit where credit was due. We found so many awesome resources to research this topic. So I'll run through them here at Cummins.com. I just found Cummins-Ram history. Great little bio there. It's only a couple paragraphs. DYEautos.com had a good article on the Dodge Ram Cummins 5.9 liter, 6.7 liter diesel engine specs. That was from Scott back in January of 2017. I picked up a Driving Line article called Cummins History. I read lessons. I read all of them. There's a bunch of lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. I read all of them. They're all by Mike McLaughlin. They were published January of 2019. That's a really recent one. I've used Mike as quite a few resources here. Yeah. So I very often read his articles. CumminsHub.com, one of my favorite places to go. I checked out 6BT Cummins Turbo Diesel and Dodge Diesel Guide. And then, of course, I circle back to a Truck Trend article originally published, I believe, through Diesel Power magazine. That was Cummins diesel motor, a diesel tech piece put together by Chris Wilkinson in February of 2007. So thanks for all the help, guys. We really appreciate being able to find resources. We've gotten some pretty good feedback on these last couple histories. We are going to continue to push to do more and more informational podcasts. I like the idea of breaking down the P7100. I'd love to do just a hardcore piece on turbocharging.
Yeah, I think, the technology of the turbochargers and, just talking about, what we've talked about it before in prior podcasts, but how a turbocharger comes into its spool, how the turbocharger comes into its full boost curve, drivability of that turbocharger is essentially where the spool comes from, and how, over the years, a lot of times guys say, more is better, but no, less is more sometimes. And I think, a full podcast on that and talking about exhaust housing aspect ratios, turbine wheel profile, compressor wheel profile, and how they all come together would make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited. Guys, for this week, we are getting ready for some local diesel drags coming up in the next week or so. So if you are in the northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin area, you want to come out and see some of the company trucks running down the drag strip, we'd be happy to see you out in Byron at the Dragway. For today, man, this has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Hemke.
Thanks for listening.
that Schaumburg slang, boy. Wow.
I do not take credibility for him.